Welcome back to the all new, all different #1 comics podcast. We are here with a very, very special guest. I'm going to try my best to make it through this interview without being too starstruck. This is a big one for us. Obviously, a very prolific creator who's done 1.5 million things. If you just go to League of Comic Geeks page or anything like that, you'll quickly be humbled with the amount of output that's been put out there. So on the line today, we have Steve Orlando.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for joining me. I don't even feel like any huge need to go into your back catalog of stuff you've done or anything like that. If you guys don't know the name Steve Orlando, then something's very off. Get to a comic book shop right away. Go pick up some books. But definitely the most recent Scarlet Witch run over at Marvel. We of course have that amazing Martian Manhunter series that you did with Riley Rossimo. And I don't have the years of that in front of me, but I want to say I don't know, 16, 17. I don't know.
I think we hit in 2018 for that.
2018. Okay.
But time gets murkier all the time.
Especially now, right?
Yeah, but I feel like I remember the announcement of that in 2018, so that feels right to me.
Okay, so around 2018 for that. Of course, some really amazing stuff on Wonder Woman. Some of the greatest Wonder Woman stuff I've ever read in my life, Steve Orlando's put out. So, yeah, I can go on and on forever about your credits here, Marauders, the Curse of the Man Thing, one shots that you did over at Marvel, the Spider-Man, the Avengers one, all of that. But I'm going to try my best to keep it a little focused here, especially towards the beginning. We are definitely talking Miguel O Hara Spider-Man 2099 right now. You're doing these these weekly, I mean, they're almost one shots. They're not quite one shots. I don't know exactly what to call them, but it's this really cool thing that you're doing right now over at Marvel, where you're taking Spider-Man 2099 and kind of weekly introducing him to these different scenarios and kind of fleshing that world out. Really, really cool thing. And again, it's something that, we've seen, comic book publishers go straight to you. They're like, hey, we've got this character. We really need like a story, like we need a connection here. We need them fleshed out. That's definitely what you did with Martian Manhunter. That's absolutely what you did with Scarlet Witch. And again, here you're doing it with Miguel O Hara, Spider-Man 2099. How the hell did this come about? This is such a cool thing. So please tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I've talked about it a little bit, but back when I was still trying to break into comics, which I started doing long ago in like 1997, I was, cold calling publishers, which, by the way, you should not do if you're trying to break in. But at that time, soon after, a couple years later, Grant Morrison came over and started working on X-Men with Frank Quitely. And I loved that run. It's what got me back into X-Men after like 4 or 5 years off. And the thing is that I wanted to pitch X-Men. This would be about 2001, 2002. I wanted to pitch X-Men, but I knew Grant and Joe Casey and Frank and Ian Churchill were doing such a killer job in the main line. Like, what could I possibly pitch that wasn't within their sphere of influence, but was still X-Men? And the pitch was X-Men 2099. So obviously that did not happen because I was like in my mid-teens. But there I was pitching what would have been like a 10th anniversary series. And then 2021 comes around for public facing, 2020 comes around for behind the scenes. And they offer me to do the 30th anniversary. So it almost felt karmically right for me to finally be working on that stuff. I was a huge 2099 fan. And that's a pretty... it's funny. All the characters you mentioned, I'm a pretty avowed fan of, even behind the scenes. Folks know I love the 2099 stuff, especially Miguel and especially X-Men. But I love it all. I love Ravage. I mean, I could go on, but and I probably will. But I think the first miniseries came because the editor was someone I'd worked with on Curse of the Man Thing. My love for Miguel and the X-Men of 2099 was extremely well known. So I have to assume it just felt like right time, right place, right interest, and of course a little bit of talent. That's for you to decide, readers. And then from there, this grew and grew. We did Dark Genesis, which is kind of our ode to Maximum Carnage, but set
Mhm.
in on Earth 2099. We did, and then we're doing Miguel O'Hara Spider-Man 2099, which is coming out right now. And then there might even be more after that. And there's also Peter and Roger's Symbiote Spider-Man 2099, which is starting in March. So it's a great time to be a Miguel fan, and there's hopefully even more on the way. But I think the push is, yeah, they want, I mean, like, I am nothing if not long on ideas. And I think the push is to expand the world to 2099. I think that's why you've seen so many new characters introduced and things like that. And it's been a fun challenge, building a character that sort of, in every case, rhymes with the inspiration, just like Miguel did with Peter, but is not a carbon copy, is not the same character, so on and so forth. I mean, that's the challenge of 2099. I like to think we've done a good job. I'm extremely proud of the stuff that's come out, but it's also just fun as hell, right? So I'm going to do it for as long as I can. And listen, if they called me tomorrow and said, "Hey, let's do one or two more," I would be there.
It's such a cool series too so far. Of course, we started off with issue number one. We kind of got that introduction of the zombies of 2099, the Marvel Zombie 2099, which is such a cool take. And then of course we're back to Blade 2099, which is uh, phenomenal. The way you wrote that character and everything that Blade does in that book, just really really cool. I really appreciated that a lot. And then in the second issue we move over to Dracula and obviously a Moon Knight incarnation, Moon Knight 2099. Of the most current issue that came out this past week has Werewolf by 2099. uh and then we're moving to Terror Inc. and of course my favorite character of all time, Man Thing 2099, who's coming up at the end of the month. Really cool. How much input, or I guess I don't even know how to ask this question. So let me think of a great way to phrase it. But did Marvel come to you with the characters that they wanted included in this 2099 universe? Did you come up with these on your own? And also, whose plan was it to kind of introduce a new character in each book weekly?
I think any type of when you're working outside of creator owned, like it's always collaborative. There's always set goals
Mhm.
when you come in, and the challenge, of course, is to make them your own and breathe life into them and all that type of very press friendly speak. But yeah, I mean, certainly at this point, the 2099 editors are very familiar with me. This is our third miniseries together, and there's always goals. There's always characters that they would love to see, and then the question becomes, how would you do it? How would you introduce them? How would you update them and build them for this cyberpunk future? So yes, there always is, but that's part of collaboration. It's like, to me, that's part of the fun. And it is exciting, right? It also solves the problem of page one, panel one. Like, we don't know what these characters are when we start out. That's our job to build them together. But yes, we know we wanted to take a look at Dracula. We knew we wanted to take a look at a new kind of zombie, because we knew there were the Romero classics around, because that's how we got
Mhm.
Blade 2099. So how can we do a new take? And that's how we came up with Zeros, which are essentially the anti-zombie in a way, but perhaps
Yep.
even worse. Same with the werewolf, same with Terror. Now I'll say Terror. Myself and Mike Basso, one of the editors, the main editor on that book, are probably the two world's biggest Terror fans outside of the literal creators of that character.
Mhm.
That was a go from minute one, because we both love Terror. And then Man Thing, I think it just made sense. I'd worked on Curse of the Man Thing with these editors, the same editorial group. The challenge with that one, of course, was making something that was new and different, even more than the others. Um, because there are aspects. I mean, I love Man Thing. I worked on the 50th anniversary.
Yep.
That being said, he's largely speaking a character that doesn't talk and things like that. So
Mhm.
the question, there's a lot more to talk about with him as to what is a core trait that you want to update, and what are things that you want to have stay with Ted Sallis, stay in the present, and be a little different in the future. So I'm very happy with how Man Thing 2099 came out. He's very different, but the pieces are all still there. Folks still burn at the touch of the Man-Thing, although in a completely different way. He's still a tragic activist scientist, but again with a different motivation and so on and so forth, as you'll see in the issue. But so yeah, the core ideas of who might be a great fit come up, but that's collaboration, and then the fun is bouncing things back and forth. Of course, bringing in your artistic co-creators, and only then, when all these people are assembled, do we start to see how these characters can really come to life. Now, could I just dictate everything? Sure, but to me, that's not what gets the best product. You'd get a comic there, but you get an even better one if I'm bringing everyone in from the start, and we're all making sure we're excited about this thing, and we're all giving our best to every single character.
Yeah, very well put. And that was something that was, definitely very interesting to me in this whole project here that you have going on with it. Uh, Kind of like the teams that were put together, because it would have been very easy to find in an artist who, would fit the style, who would fit the 2099 style, and then fit in with, if you pitch them, all right, we're going to do Man Thing in this issue, we're going to do Blade here, we're going to do Zombies, Terror, and so forth. But instead, the way that this is done is each issue has a different featured artist. So we have the Marvel branding, we have the 2099 branding, we have written by Steve Orlando, but then we have a completely different artist on each issue. And I would sit here and go through each of the names. I'm horrible at pronouncing names, especially there's a couple in here that I won't even come close, so I won't sit there and try to do that. But yeah, we've got some very different artists throughout this 5-issue series here that's happening, and I think it's such a cool spin to put on it. You're introducing Miguel in these different kind of situations with these different characters, and then we get a different artist on each one. I'd love to know, and if this is kind of piggybacking off my last question, you can stop me or whatever, but how that happened, versus just finding, that one artist that kind of felt like we could encapsulate all of it or whatever.
Well, the with a weekly, it is nearly impossible to have one artist. So,
Hmm.
like the reality is that we knew from the start there was going to be a different person in every issue. But that's also how you build the sort of pseudo one-shot style, right? You want it to all feel complete.
Yep.
Pardon me, like folks are getting their money's worth, so on and so forth. But the reality is, like, we just, I wish we had the lead time to do a single artist on a weekly, but it is extremely rare.
Hmm.
And that is not a bad thing, like, because I think everybody would rather get five issues from five different artists who've all had enough time to make them look great than five issues from the same one who was working at 40% capacity because they were blowing through things. So it is, when you're doing a weekly, it's extremely rare. Like, for example, on Martian Manhunter, which you brought up, I mean, we started that, the first issue of that came out almost 2 years after we started developing that book. Like, so the longer a
Wow.
book is, the longer a book is, and the more time it takes, of course, to get enough lead time creatively where it's all coming out with the same creative team monthly and not late. Now, of course, things can be delayed and so on and so forth. But for me, I feel like that promise of a new book on Wednesday, when you said it was going to be there, is paramount. I've always
Hmm.
felt that way. It's why we, it was unfortunate, but it's why we had to use a fill-in artist on the second issue I ever wrote, Midnight #2. But it was important to me that when back, because we were like posting solicits online and things back then, that when I said Midnight #2 was going to come out on a certain date, that it was definitely there. So there's a lot of factors to go in, as I've been rambling about. But the key is, yeah, we knew when it's a weekly, there's always going to be individual artists, and then again, that just becomes another creative challenge and something to get excited about. You get to see
Hmm.
all these different takes on the cyberpunk future. And I think that it's not just for you guys. Like, to be clear, I get excited. I'm surprised to see things come to life. Like, we love these things too. So it is a fact of doing weeklies, but it's also something to be taken advantage of creatively and celebrated, because yeah, you get to be surprised every single issue. Every single issue feels even fresher and even newer than it would otherwise. You maybe don't necessarily build the sort of back and forth and creative flow you would like that I have with Riley. But
Hmm.
that's not bad. That's just different, and I think keeping yourself challenged like that I think it also makes the work coming from me and the work from everyone else involved a little more fresh. So it is, while it is a reality, I think that you end up getting a really exciting product because of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does, and I like how you say that, kind of bringing in a challenge for yourself. I would think that somebody with your level of experience, of course, you're kind of looking forward to a challenge at this point because you don't want
Oh, it's
that
always a
same
challenge.
format.
It's always a challenge, I'll tell you. Like
Uh-huh.
the minute you don't think it's a challenge, then you're becoming
Yep.
complacent. And to be clear, like like comics are not cheap. I say this all the time. Like we can
Mhm.
never afford to get comfortable as creators.
Yep.
We got to keep like hustling new work, hustling new ideas, and challenging ourselves. Because again, like, how much can a banana cost? $10, Lucille. Like comics are $5 now, or sometimes, well, anywhere between $3 and $5, depending on the
Mhm.
publisher. Um, and that's not nothing, especially these days. So we got to make sure that you're getting as much as you possibly can every single time. So just to have it be said, it's always a challenge. I mean, this year it'll be 10 years in the business for me, and 25 plus learning the business and being either being mentored or pitching and networking and things like that. And it's still challenging. It should always be challenging. The minute we start to think this is rote, I think that we're sort of not realizing how exciting a position we're in, and how much people really care about these things. And you can't lose sight of that.
Yeah, obviously, a very important point there. You kind of would hate your, comic book creator to just feel very complacent and very, roll with the same punches that come out month after month or anything like that, and not try to be innovative. That's definitely, not anything anybody could accuse you of, not being innovative. You just go through any of that output there. Especially, look, I said I would try my best to stay focused, but now I'm gonna go off a little bit, so you'll have to excuse me. But especially going back to that, Marauders run, or then going into the Scarlet Witch series that just kind of wrapped a little while ago. Uh, the Scarlet Witch series is just, I mean, to anybody who hasn't read that, you're completely missing out. I mean, please go out, go buy the single issues if you can still find them. Go buy a trade, whatever. The Scarlet Witch series is so amazing, so amazingly done. There's, I want to know how you got into the head of this character, because I mean, you really, really fleshed her out. I mean, there was really, I, for me to say there was just kind of like a husk of a character there before would, there wasn't. The character was fleshed out nicely. She was a great character in the 616 in the Marvel universe. There's so much more added to her story at this point. What you're doing with the character, what you've done with the character, is phenomenal. And I just want to know how you were able to get in that headspace and really flesh that out.
I mean, first of all, I mean, like one of the ways is because, as you said, we had a great foundation.
Mhm.
And the big key is that we were starting with Darkhold, and with what Leah was kicking off with Trial of Magneto a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Leah and Lucas. Sorry, I was stalling for time to remember.
Oh, you're fine.
And myself and Kian on Darkhold. Uh, they get to go ahead. They get the go ahead rather to finally move beyond a lot of the things that were that Wanda had struggled with for a long time. As you said, there is a great character there. She's always been a great character. We didn't fix Wanda because there was nothing to fix, but she
Mhm.
had kind of been in a holding pattern with the stuff. With this trauma, going back to House of M, going back to what she did with Mutant Kind, going back to how Chthon had been using her since she was born. And we wanted to turn the page, and the fact that we got the go ahead to do that was a really big boon to the series. At the same time, that holding pattern isn't, here's the thing. From my point of view, despite her massive power level, Wanda is one of the most relatable characters in the Marvel universe because,
Mhm.
much like us, she screws up all the time. Like and I'm not making a joke there. It sounds funny because I can sound like a sarcastic person, but um, even characters on the hero's journey are often have a much more linear path than people in real life. And for whatever reason, for the past 60 years, Wanda has not had that. She's had
Mhm.
huge setbacks. She's had huge mistakes. Now, we also have huge setbacks as people. We have huge mistakes. Of course, when we make huge mistakes, it's like we left the milk out or something. I mean, it can be worse than that, but it's not like the cosmos is on the line. So the scale of Wanda's mistakes are bigger, but to me, that's just the lens of comics. Comics are bigger. They are more absurd. They are wilder. But when you hone that down and you sort of break through the fog of the window dressing, the explosions and the cosmic nature of her actions, she's still someone who is trying to better herself and overcome her mistakes, and that's the only thing any of us can really do. So I think, and even that holding pattern, right? How many of us have feel that at different points in life where we don't even know, like we don't even know why we can't make purchase on the next step forward. So I mean, myself and Alana and Caitlin and Sarah, Lorenzo, everyone who's worked on the book, I mean, of course, appreciate to hear how you feel about the book. You know, I think the answer for us is that we see her as a fallible person who is still making efforts all the time to get better and to grow and turn the page. And we been lucky that we're allowed to have her be the ones to tell that journey, rather. And again, to make her just like us through the lens of comics. But even now, where she thinks that she always knows the answer, she's about to find out that she doesn't, and we've already kind of hinted at that. And that might be crushing for her at first, because she isn't used to being in this spot. Oh, you know, I thought I was done with my anger. I thought I was done with all this. And eventually Darcy says, well, you were right up until you weren't. But that's what it's like to be a person. That's what it's like to be a human being. So it's really pleasing to hear you say that. We're really proud of the book. But I think the answer is actually really simple. Despite all of the madness of her powers and the adventures she goes on, we try to just write her like a real dimensional fallible person. And I know that maybe sounds wild, because she's someone who could rewrite the rules of reality on a whim. But the fact is that, like, her problems are still like ours, and her victories are ours. And I think that's what makes people love her.
Yeah, and I mean, absolutely, she's a wonderful character. You know, before you know, and even much more relatable and like I was saying before, fleshed out character. After you know, you've been writing on the series. I want to know, you know, you talked about Darcy for a sec there. Now, I can't remember if I'm 100% correct. You introduced Darcy into the comic book universe. She wasn't a part of it before this.
We did, yes.
Okay. Yes. I thought. Well, yes, y'all. Sorry, you guys. How was that, bringing in a character from the MCU into the comic books? How was that, you know, response from fans? How was that expectation? And then again, working with a character who a lot of people are only familiar with, you know, her portrayal in the MCU and on the Avengers, and then in the Disney Plus show and all of that. You know, stripping that back down, bringing her back, you know, strictly into comic book form. Did you have to use? Sorry, what did you have to use? You know, based on the MCU versus, you know, what was just on the page. Sorry, I'll shut up because I'm asking such a long question here, and there's no way for me to retain that much at a time. But yeah.
No, I think, well, first of all, Darcy came about. It was a confluence of events. You're always looking for everything you can possibly do in a first issue to get as many eyes on it as you can, and that includes first appearances. Yes. So we had created we always knew there was going to be this person in Wanda's life, but as we got into breaking the outline for the first arc and the second arc and writing the first issue, we realized, I mean, probably because my sense of humor and my sarcasm is very similar to that of Kat Dennings, that I was already kind of writing Darcy. Like she might have had a different name, but the style and how she fit into the world was very similar. Not just to Darcy in WandaVision, but it's funny, like she going back to her original role as sort of the feet of clay for the wildness of Thor's mythology. And that's sort of what we knew was really vital for her in this book, is to be the person that does point out how strange everything is, and does have the, you know, the everyday person's reaction. Of course, she has her secrets and so on and so forth. But it's been a boon, right? Like the minute the lore talk gets a little too heavy, the Darcy is there to lighten it up a little bit, and it's really been a boon to all of us. But she's also, you know, she's someone who cares. She's someone who's passionate. So you see her and she's not stupid. She learns all the time. She's like, so she, you see her learning more about what Wanda does and Wanda's craft. You see her standing up for Wanda, like in issue 10. And she is a fearless character, despite not having any powers, quote unquote. So it's been a boon having her in. And honestly, you asked, like, what did we have to do to make it like the MCU? There, we had nothing. In this case, it was, I mean, yes, we should use her, but do what works for the comic first. And I think that's the best thing it can be. You always want to lead, because here's the thing. And that doesn't mean that the MCU version is worse. I'm not sitting here but it does mean that film and TV are just different, and the world is just different. So if you're I think the best way to bring these things in when it happens is like, yeah, you hit the core of the character. And I think her core function in the book is similar to how she fits in the MCU. But other things have to change, right? Because it is a different world. And there are different storytelling tropes and things like that. So, sometimes there are specific things you have to do when you're bringing a character in, but with her, it was just like, let's put her in. Let's make her the version that works in the Marvel universe. And she's been, with 10 issues and counting, because the sequel miniseries comes out next month. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. She's been one of my favorite parts of the book. One of mine, because there's almost no parts that are not my favorite parts of that book. It's one of my favorite things I've done at Marvel. But she really has been a boon. I can't believe they let us get away with her calling Loki's cousin a gold-plated hole of an ass or a shiny whining enema, but we did. It's in print, and I'm all the better for it.
Yeah, and kind of going back to what we were talking about before. Of course, like I said, I'll try my best, to stay on track with Miguel O here, with Miguel O here in the conversation. But it's so natural the way that you brought Darcy into those books. It wasn't something that you had to do. You could have worked the book, with another character or whatever. She was the perfect component to bring into that book to make it relatable, to have that voice, that counterpart to Scarlet Witch there and everything. And it's just a wonderful inclusion. And that's what I think about. I'm sitting here, going back over the three Spider-Man 2099s that have dropped so far, in this weekly run here that you're doing, and including Blade 2099 in that first issue. Of course, the second is and sorry, to go back, also including the Marvel Zombie 2099. But the second issue is very focused around Dracula. The third very focused around Werewolf by 2099. But there's such like natural fits in the story, and we're still very focused on what Spider-Man 2099 is doing. It's still really fleshing out that character. Again, you're like the punch-up guy. Like anytime somebody is like, hey, we really, really need people to connect to this character, and we really need them fleshed out more than they are, they call Steve Orlando. I mean, that's what you're here for. So it's just amazing what you're doing on these books, and amazing. It's really exciting to read Spider-Man 2099 right now, to see what you're including. I can't wait to read what, especially knowing now how invested in Terror you are, to read that. That's dropping tomorrow. Today is Tuesday. This, I will publish this tonight, and have it out for everybody on your way to the comic book shop. Make sure you pick that up, as if you weren't already. But definitely make sure you pick that up, knowing that Steve is so invested in Terror 2099 here, and then my favorite character next week, Man Thing. Just really cool the way you're able to bring in those characters and make them, again, like I said, very, very fleshed out. Do you find it is it something easy for you to do, knowing that you're, kind of the guy, like I said, that these publishers are going to? They're like, really flesh this out for us.
No, I mean, like, well, it's something that I enjoy.
Mhm.
But I mean, like, sort of like I said earlier, it's never easy, but it shouldn't be, right?
Yeah, sure.
We're not, because we're not making the same thing every time.
Mhm.
So it should never be easy, but it is work that I really enjoy.
Mhm.
And I love making new stuff. I love adding to this tapestry that at Marvel is either 60 or 80 years old, depending on if they're timely characters, um, or Atlas characters, any of the pre-Marvel Comics characters. And and there's always more to do at the same time, right? I appreciate all the things you're saying about Miguel. um and there's so much more. Like we just, because of the demands of the series, we haven't really had a lot of time to focus on his own sort of like supporting cast and things like that, out of costume especially. And I would
Mhm.
love to do that. Like, there's always more things to do. I'd love to be able to. One of the reasons Blade came back is that, like, making cool characters is one thing, but then they have to return. You have to examine them further and things like that. So as things continue, hopefully we get some more chances to do that. Because yeah, like, I love Blade. I mean, I love Miguel. I love the X-Men. Um, Getting to create new characters for those worlds is equally, if not more, exciting. I love Blade 2099. I love Cyclops and Phoenix from the X-Men issue and Exodus. I
Mhm.
would love for them to come back again. I've always wanted to unravel the mystery of She-Hulk 2099. I know what her story is. We were only able to get her into one panel, so we gotta flesh it out. So
Yep.
um, it is work that is really enjoyable, and the thing is that it's also aggregative, and it always allows for more. Like, the steps for what's next are always right there when your creative team is firing and you're building these characters in the right way.
Yes. And there's some, amazing characters to pick from, and then, kind of update into this, or sorry, rather, reimagine this 2099 world. Like you said, it's that whole different world. It's that whole steampunk, techno, whatever. I can't think of the right jargon to use, but the vibe that's there. It's you get to take these loved characters, these lesser known characters, whatever, and give them the 2099 upgrade, and it's really cool, and it's something. Again, I'm as a fan, I'm looking forward to reading the Man Thing one, and judging on the last three issues. I really can't wait. I think it's going to be amazing. But like I said to all of our audience out there listening, you're on the way to the local comic book shop. Make sure you pick up issue number 4. That is dropping on January 24th this year, of course, and then next week on January 31st we have the final issue, which is going to have the Man Thing 2099 in it. And if nothing else, make sure you guys pick that one up for me so you can let me know how you feel about Steve's job on
But
Man
no
Thing
pressure at all.
2099. Yeah. No, no, no pressure. No, very much looking forward to it. I think it's going to be amazing. Uh, One of the last things that I want to talk about, again, we kind of hit like the sweet spot here. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Is kind of where we left off on that first issue of this run here, the one introducing the Marvel Zombie 2099, and of course having played 2099 there. Uh, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't read it yet. Of course, you know what I'm talking about, but we get left off in a really really cool place. A really kind of open place. This is one where, not to say that the other issues are like closed off and that self-contained, they do say, they all read in a way where it's like, okay, this is a one shot, but there's definitely more going on here. We could tell more of a story. You could always circle back around and tell more of this. Sure. I love the way that you leave that one because, like I said, very self contained, reads wonderfully as a one shot, but it leaves the door open for something because where some of the characters are left off at the end of that issue, really, really intriguing. Do you do you have any plans to maybe return to that?
Um, yeah, I mean, plans, yes. Like as I said, we'll see what the needs are of future
Mhm.
series if I get invited back. But suffice to say, yes to plans. And I'd love, like I said, top of my list is doing more with the X-Men. Top of my list is doing more with Miguel's, long-term supporting cast. He's been in costume a lot, for these
Mhm.
events because they've been these big sort of sprawling, essentially, yes, essentially, like, even though they're not in the summer, like they're event series, right? Like Exodus was a crossover event, Dark
Mhm.
Genesis is a crossover event. Now we're honing down. This is at least Miguel and one other character, but I would love to actually like focus in on Miguel's world. Um, that's the counterpoint to always introducing these new characters and things like that, is that he ends up staying relatively static, though we can learn from them, of course, and so on and so forth. But no, absolutely, I'd love to dig into the status quo as we leave it at the end of Zombie. I would love to explore characters that have never even appeared under my pen and this editorial team's pen from 2099, because there's just so much there. We just need the time, and hopefully they let us keep coming back.
Yes. Well, I'm sure they will. And judging by the response of this, current volume here of Miguel O'Hara Spider-Man 2099, that again, guys, is currently in shops. If you're just picking up right now, you just I don't go back to the back issue bin and see if they have any left of issues 1 through 3. You're definitely going to want to pick up each one of those. They're amazing. And then you can hop on tomorrow's Terror 2099 and then next week's Man Thing 2099. But make sure you guys are picking those up in your local comic book shop. And Steve, what else do you have on the horizon? Is there anything you want to push? Anything you can talk about? I know you, judging by your output, you're working on probably about 30 projects a day. So is there anything big coming out you want to talk about?
Well, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver starts next month. I believe the first issue hits on Valentine's Day, I think. We send stuff to print super, super early now. So like the shelf dates sometimes are a little ephemeral. Also in March, Silver Vessels, my first young adult book ever, is debuting from the folks at Mad Cave. I'm working on Gotcha Man with Mad Cave as well, which is going to start coming out this year. Right now, X-Men Unlimited is running. Myself and Steve Fox are doing the story that runs along Rise of the House of X, Fall of I got them mixed up. Sorry, Fall of the House of X, Rise of the Powers of X. These titles are getting so long, it's like the Planet of the Apes franchise. I'm sorry. So that's coming out, and we're extremely proud of that. And I'm sure there's more too. I have to look at my cheat sheet, but as you said, there's always a lot going on. And we just announced I'm doing a book from Magma Comics called Scale Trade. Details from that are going to be coming soon, but it's one of the launch books for a brand new publisher, Magma Comics. I'm working with Megan Wong. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous book. That's hitting this year, and I'm sure there's more, but I've already laid a lot on everyone. But also, like I said, the big thing is Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver for me, at least for me in Marvel. For folks who enjoyed the first run, as much as you're able, of course, support this mini. And we are going to be coming back after. That's in the initial press release. I can't say exactly how, but you'll know very soon. But that being said, of course, how this does, how what comes after does, that sort of controls how much more Scarlet Witch we get to tell. So please check that out if you haven't, if you want to catch up. The first collected edition is out. The second one is coming out either next month or the month after, called Magnum Opus. I think it's some of my best work of Marvel and some of the best work of my career. So please check it out. And as Dan said, Spider-Man 2099 is coming out right now every week in January. We're doing cyberpunk versions of Marvel's horror classics. And if that goes well, I think you'll see us back in 2099 again.
Yeah, I can only hope, but I'm sure we will. And I love how you so nonchalantly put, for those who liked the Scarlet Witch series, like there was anybody out there who didn't like it. But just amazing
Very
stuff,
kind.
amazing output. Yes, Steve, I can't thank you enough for your time. It's been amazing talking to you again. I tried my best not to fanboy out, so hopefully I didn't too bad. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for talking to us about Miguel O'Hara Spider-Man 2099 and about all your other projects. And I will make sure that I have everything up and coming in the show notes. Anything that I can get FOC for and a previews link will be listed in the show notes as well. So make sure you guys check that out. Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I cannot, again, thank you enough for carving out the time to talk to me today. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you so, so much.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, my friend.
And editing Dan from the future here, Steve wanted to make sure that we included, and of course, I wanted to make sure as well that we included an organization that Steve is currently working with. He wrote a book along with Jose Andreas, who is a chef and They teamed up with World Central Kitchen to travel into natural disasters across the world to bring food and hope to those that are most affected. A beautiful, beautiful book by TKO Studios in association with World Central Kitchen, and that's Feeding Dangerously. And you can order the book. It's a graphic novel through feedingdangerously.com. Again, that is Feeding Dangerously, a book by Jose Andres and Steve Orlando, and out by TKO Studios in association with World Central Kitchen. Go to feedingdangerously.com. It's a wonderful cause, of course, and they donate to those affected by these natural disasters. Feedingdangerously.com. Make sure you guys are on that. Check that out. Thank you so much, and thanks for listening to that Steve Orlando interview. One of the coolest interviews I have done in my podcasting career here. And next up, after the break, I'll go over the promised 1991 Volume 2, Number 1 of the Twilight Zone comic from Now Comics. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the all-new, all-different Number 1 Comics podcast. This is going to be a first for me. Of course, you know, I set up this podcast and got Bob on board, and we do the regular weekly show talking about the brand new first issue comic books. I also have done some really cool bonus episodes, and those, you know, you can check out. We've done some really, really cool stuff, but that kind of follows the same format. Me and a guest, you know, break down a first issue comic book, just one that Bob and I weren't able to get to. I'm going to try something a little different today. This is something that's not been done before, and this is going to be my first like solo outing. So we'll see how this goes. If you guys like it, please let me know. If you hate it, let me know, and I won't do them again. But I thought I would do something a little different. Again, we can't always get to every comic because, you know, we only have so much time and we only do one per episode. I wanted to dig back in the back catalog and do like an older comic. I thought that would be fun. Now, Bob and I did that one time with The Last of Us. It was very topical because The Last of Us TV show was coming out and all of that during that time period. This isn't very topical. This is a little different. This is just something that I kind of wanted to do, so I did. So I'll kind of skip the back history and just give you like a really quick reasoning why I did this. I'm a huge Twilight Zone fan. I have a number of favorite TV shows, as most people do, but of course, you know, I love the Gilmore Girls is my favorite show. Friends is one of my favorite shows. Daria, Lost, and then my other favorite show is The Twilight Zone. Of course, the original run, and I love The Twilight Zone, and I love all of those shows. One of the things that sucks is even though there's so many licensed comics and so many adaptations of movies and television shows and video games and all of that, most of the things that I really love, there's not adaptations of. So there's no Gilmore Girls, there's no Friends, there's no Daria comic books or anything like that. So there is a few volumes of Twilight Zone, and they read very differently than the show, but I thought that this would be fun. So I'm doing the Twilight Zone, and this is the second volume. I believe the first volume just had one issue, so this was more of an ongoing, and it's anthology. You know, there's different writers, different artists on each issue, and all of that. It doesn't follow like a storyline or anything, much like the Twilight Zone doesn't either. And it was published by Now Comics, a publisher that I think is now done. I don't think they publish anything anymore, but they did a lot of licensed stuff in the late 80s, early 90s. They were doing like Terminator stuff and Ghostbusters, Married with Children, all that kind of thing. Now, this is published in November of 1991, and the story is called The Big Dry. And I'm still going to do this the way that I do the normal episode. I'll still go over like the plot synopsis really quick and kind of break it down a little bit. But I'm going to read like my entire narrative of the book. So again, very different than what I normally do. Not the same type of thing. So if you're not into that, if you don't want to listen to this episode or whatever, completely understood. But if you do, give it a shot, see where it goes. I'd appreciate it. So from League of Comic Geeks, this comic is The Big Dry, written by Bruce Jones, art by Eddie Newell and John Strangeland. This is a hot story, and we do mean hot. It takes place in the desert with a man, woman, and child, and a giant monster. So that is the plot synopsis. Very, very short and to the point. Talk about the creators really quick. Bruce Jones, who needs no introduction. Bruce Jones, working on comic books since, I don't know, before any of us were alive, I guess. I don't know. Bruce Jones definitely has a storied career in comics. Kind of starting, it looks like his first credit is 1968 with Eerie 16. And, he's gone from there. He did one of my favorite runs on Incredible Hulk, actually. The kind of relaunch down to... It started with number 34, I think. Yeah, 34 in 2002. And it kind of is like a Incredible Hulk Fugitive type of run. If you remember The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, based on the old television show, it's kind of like that. It's a really, really cool run. There's a lot of issues. It's from 34 to 76 is how long he wrote on that. He also did a big run on Khazar the Savage, Vampirella, Creepy, Eerie, Conan the Barbarian, Dead Man, The War That Time Forgot, Savage Sword of Conan, House of Mystery, The Warlord, Alien Worlds, and a lot more. But yeah, a really, really cool creator. If you've not checked out his stuff, he's a really good writer. The penciler on this is Eddie Newell. And I'm not too sure about Eddie, but he's done work on Black Lightning, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Vampire the Masquerade, The Green Hornet, which is also out from Now Comics, and quite a few other things. So he's got a career in comics as well, kind of a longer career there. And inked by John Strangeland. John Strangeland also working on Tales of the Green Hornet for Now Comics, Venom the Haunted, Slimer, if you remember the cool Slimer comics. I think there was only 2 of them out in the late 80s, early 90s. He did Fright Night, Ultra Force, Married with Children, Kelly Bundy Special, Venom Along Came a Spider, and so on. It's done quite a few things. So there's our creators there, and also colored by the X staff, whomever that is. I don't see much credit for them, so I won't really waste any time going into that, which I don't know. But again, I'm not really going to read my plot synopsis. I have like a whole breakdown of this book, like a retelling. So I think I'll do that since I'm on my own here. And maybe just sum up my like kind of review that we normally do like at the end very quickly. So this will be the bulk of the show. And then the normal review and stuff that Bob and I or guests usually do will be a little bit tighter and shorter. So this the book opens with an almost full page spread of a family car broken down on a desert road. The next 2 panels we meet Carla and her husband Stanley. And Carla is the clearly dominant one in the relationship. She belittles Stanley, who's taken the wrong highway, getting them lost. Carla then gets out of the car, and we're introduced to Corky, who is Carla's daughter. And at this point, she's maybe Stanley's stepdaughter, but we're kind of unsure because she constantly refers to him by his name instead of dad. Corky tells Stanley she wishes just the 2 of them could travel without her mom. Stanley gets the car going again, and the 2 bicker as they drive off. The family then comes upon a house. Carla runs inside looking for water, and the car completely dies, and Corky's watch completely stops. Carla opens the front door and turns on the sink, which doesn't run, and opens the empty refrigerator. Carla's then going over to the cupboard, and a severely dehydrated body falls out. Carla runs to the front door and hops in the broke down car, and Stanley and Corky run around from the backyard where we see like this massive hole or crater. It's not really explained, but there's like pieces of fence like broken down around it and everything, or wood or whatever. Stanley then runs inside with Corky following close behind him, and they find a man who's in the same state as the woman who fell from the cupboard. But now we learn that they're actually both alive, and they're barely alive. They just kind of look like zombies. Corky and Stanley are very scared, and then the family finds a place to lay and rest as they hope for rain to come through. Just then, a cop stops in the home to check on the homeowners, and we finally learn that Stanley is Corky's stepdad, and the family is from Oklahoma. The cop looks at the almost dead couple, the couple from before, the homeowners, and radios into town, but the call won't go through, and Stanley explains that an electromagnetic field surrounds the house, which he noticed because of Corky's watch stopping. We also find that the cop's car's battery is dead, and then the deputy brings in food and water from his cruiser, and everyone eats. While they're at the dining room table eating, Carla flirts with the deputy over and under the table. And later, during a big storm, everyone is in bed. We find Stanley alone in bed, and Corky comes in because she's scared. She crawls into bed with Stanley and asks where her mother is. And she's asking Stanley why he stays with her, and he tells her that she'll understand when she's older. And Corky expresses to him again that she wishes her mom was out of the picture and it was just the two of them as he comforts her in the bed. Excuse me. We then flash over to the dehydrated bodies in the other room, one of the dehydrated bodies in the other room, and then we see a door being opened with 3 fingers from a green hand with massive claws on it. The next morning, the deputy, whose name is revealed to be Matt, and Carla are being handsy in the kitchen, and Stanley yells for the cop as he comes across the body seen a few panels before. The man of the house, now looking completely zombie-like, has bite wounds or stab wounds or something on his neck and has moved. Stanley and Matt go out back to bury the body, and Matt notices the hand of his watch spinning like crazy when they get near the giant hole. Stanley then walks into the kitchen, a few moments later, a little while later, whatever. Stanley walks into the kitchen, catching Matt and Carla. Later that night, Carla goes to bed with Matt goes into the bed that Matt's sleeping in and finds him dead. She blames Stanley, but Stanley points out that Matt's blood has been drained just like the male homeowner. And he's actually still alive. The family then catches the beast as it tries to get inside, but they barricade the door and it runs off. Stanley attributes it running off to the dawning daylight. Stanley and Corky go outside to investigate, and Stanley notices weird footprints coming from the massive hole. Inside, Stanley reads to Corky about an African swamp toad that hibernates in dried lake beds until the rainy season brings it back to life. Stanley concludes that the monster buried itself centuries or longer ago, and that rain brings it back to life. He theorizes that it keeps its victims alive with something in its saliva so it can have fresh food. The pair see Carla out the window as she tries to escape, and just as it begins to rain, Stanley and Corky gather wood for a fire in the pit. It doesn't help as the rain... what's the word? The rain puts out the fire. Sorry, couldn't think of words there. And the monster begins to crawl out of the hole. So then they start boarding up the house. Just as the monster begins to open the door, Stanley uses force and smashes it on the monster's hand, which cuts it off, but it's still determined to get inside. We then find Carla dead in the kitchen, and we finally get a reveal of the monster in full. The pair then get down to the cellar where the beast is currently locked out of, and Stanley feels trapped because there's no windows or any way out, and he starts to feel hopeless, but Corky reminds him that he's the smartest man alive and that he can get them out of the situation. Feeling desperate to save her, Stanley begins to look for a solution and finds sacks of quicklime, and Stanley plans to use it to dehydrate the monster. He then rigs up a fan and pours the quicklime in front of it just as the beast breaks down the door and gets in. And as it's covered in the quicklime, Stanley lights it on fire, hopefully killing the monster. And then the cops show up in the aftermath, and Stanley explains the story to them. They take the pair back to town just as it begins to sprinkle a little bit, and then we see another hand reach out from the hole in the distance there. So that kind of wraps up the story, and then of course it has, it's labeled "The End" with a question mark in it. So, that's kind of my read of the book, and to break it down, I guess, like I normally do in the podcast, to give it like a, my review or whatever, breaking down the story beats and all of that stuff that we do here. I think that, the story beats move along great. Bruce Jones clearly knows how to tell a story. He gets from point A to point B very well here. It's not too confusing or anything. I would say, if I had to dwell on anything, I would say there's a few disconnects going through the book. I think we get into about the third or fourth page here, maybe the fifth page. And as Carla's, going inside of the house and Stanley and Corky are still kind of in the car, it all of a sudden flashes to them being around the back of the house, and they're near that big hole, and that's never really addressed. The hole's not really addressed. So that's a little weird, but, just a small disconnect, not anything to be too concerned about. I think one of the other things that's a little disconnect is us assuming that these people are dead and then finding out they're alive, but then it doesn't really explain much about that. Of course, Stanley theorizes that, it's the monster wanting to keep them alive so he can have fresh blood, and I understand that, but it appears that, whenever Matt died, or whenever Matt was drained, it was never addressed that he was still alive again, other than just saying it in one panel. And then Carla, is she dead? Is she just drained? It doesn't really say much about that. So I think the beats work. Getting from point A to point B definitely work, and it wraps up nicely at the end of the story. The only problem is there's a few disconnects along the way, so that's my only critique of that. The dialogue. Now, that's going to be a weird one because I think it's a little harder to remove myself from the time period I'm currently in. This, of course, is January in 2024, and I'm reading a comic book from November of 1991. The cultural zeitgeist is very different. What's frowned upon now wasn't then, and all of that stuff. It's a little weird. The relationship between Corky and Stanley is a little strange for a stepfather stepdaughter relationship. You couldn't really say a lot of these things now. It would be viewed as very weird. So it reads a little weird, especially in the dialogue. It's almost a little creepy, if I have to be honest, but I understand the time period, it wouldn't probably really be viewed as that. But it reads that way now. I think that's something like an author would shy away from now, really saying anything like that. And to explain what I mean is, a lot of the times whenever it's just Corky and Stanley talking, she's expressing how she wants to be alone with him. She wants her mom out of the picture. So it's just those two. Really not even anything you would want to hear a child say about either parent, even if it was like their natural parent and not like a step parent. But I think it makes it a little more uncomfortable that it's a step parent. She's saying that. I don't know. Something about it's a little weird. I don't have much of an experience with step parents, so I don't know if it sounds weird to anyone else. To me, it read a little weird. But I don't blame Bruce Jones for that. I think it was just of the time. Now the narrative. Talking about the narrative of this book and the narrative of these characters, it works very well. It's a very straightforward narrative. I think it's easily explained, and it does take like a little bit of a note from the Twilight Zone, the way that this is narratively told. So I don't know exactly how to explain that in a way that makes sense, but if you read the book, you'd understand what I'm saying. The world building's great. Bruce Jones knows how to build a world. This is a very lived-in world. This is what you expect. It's like a desert town. It's experiencing like a drought and then heavy rain and everything. An abandoned house with a monster. Like, we're very familiar with this. The world's fleshed out very great, and it works really well. To get into the art, and again, this is kind of different than we normally do it. We have a penciler and an inker. A lot of times we're not getting that in most books now. It's kind of like digital art or whatever. We just have one artist, one illustrator, and then a separate colorist. But this is Eddie Newell on pencils and John Strangeland on inks. So done a little bit differently in 1991 than it is in 2024, whatever year this is. But yeah, I like the art. I think the art is really, really good here. Overall, the characters look great. There's a lot of talent, put into this, and it looks like it was done really, really well, which usually, sadly, I would say, whenever we had these kind of publishers in the 90s and stuff, I feel like while I like the art of DC and Marvel and the big two and all of that, I feel like it was, done a lot better on these like smaller press books and these independent ones. The art's phenomenal in some of it, and it just gets lost because it's not like a Spider-Man or Batman book, which is sad. But yeah, the character art's really great here. Really good depictions that are solid all the way through. Really consistent. I love Carla's look. It's a very nice look. She's not over stylized for the time, but she definitely fits in the time period. Now, sometimes I think back to like, Mary Jane Watson in 1991, and it was just so over stylized. It looked crazy. Same thing with like some of the X-Men and everything. But this is a more subtle look, but fits in the time period very well. So I like the characterizations. The only critique I have for the characters is Corky. She looks a little weird. She a lot of emphasis on her eyebrows, on her freckles, on her teeth, her bangs. It's sometimes a little bit too much. But I mean, she's like I don't know, she's like a 6 to 9-year-old kid. I don't know. They have like weird, they don't always fit into their body at that point, or their face or whatever, their features just yet at that age. So I guess I can get that. The backgrounds look great. All the backgrounds look really, really wonderful. They're subtle in areas. They're very pronounced in others. They look wonderful. Don't know much else to say about that. The locations, again, if you open to this first page of the book and you see the sprawling desert there, it's got every element of the desert. It's got that, I don't know if it's called limestone or what, but it's got that really, you're just seeing sand everywhere. You're seeing, and then it goes into, smaller cactuses that go into larger cactus, and then you have like these chipped away, I don't know, clayish like looking areas and mountainous areas with a little tiny bit of vegetation and greenery, with big mountains in the background. It looks wonderful. The locations look really, really good. And then the last thing, the colors, which is by the X staff again, whoever the X staff is. Maybe, they were the X-Men color staff or the X-Force color staff or whatever. The colors look really good. They do that 90s thing, though. They're really kind of blown out. They're big. They're not subtle at all. Like, you don't see the subtlety in certain things. But that's just the style of the times in the early 90s. That's kind of how, excuse me, colors were looking, especially in the backgrounds and stuff. You had a lot of shading with the pencils and inks versus the colors. So it's very different from now. But I would say the colors look really good. And here's what I'm going to say. Overall, I would suggest moving on to issue number 2. I'm a huge Twilight Zone fan. I like these Now comics. And I like how they bring in, a different creative team for each one of these. It's really cool. It's really fun. If you're a big fan of 90s stuff and Twilight Zone, like, this might be up your alley. But I will say this. This is not a Twilight Zone type of book. This is a good, like, little, like, I don't know, monster one-shot or whatever. It's fine. I don't see how it takes place in the Twilight Zone. I don't get that Twilight Zone element from it. And unfortunately, that's the same thing that we get anytime you revisit the Twilight Zone out of the original series, to be honest with you. When they did the 80s Twilight Zone, and then whenever they did I think it was the early 2000s Twilight Zone, it just didn't have those elements for me. And then I'm very sorry, but the Jordan Peele Twilight Zone just doesn't feel like the Twilight Zone at all either. Just feels like a cheap attempt at rehashing, the original Twilight Zone. I don't know. I hate to say it, but in any form, I think it's really hard to capture the Twilight Zone. It was just a product of its time, and it was really, really good, and I haven't seen anybody successfully recapture that. Now, maybe whenever you go into the early like Black Mirror stuff, that's more Twilight Zone-ish than any Twilight Zone retelling or reboot or anything that I've seen or read. I don't know. That's just my opinion. Maybe you have a different opinion if you're a big Twilight Zone fan, but that is what I think. So I would continue on to issue number 2 just to read this anthology and see where it goes, and read these kind of cool like horror sci-fi one-shots. I think they're fun. I think it's Twilight Zone. I don't think it's the Twilight Zone at all. I couldn't see this in the original series at all. Maybe the 80s series, I could see something more like this, which makes sense. 1991. I can't remember exactly when that 80s series ran, but I would say it's hard. I would say, check it out if you're really into like fun, no-brainer sci-fi horror things. If you're looking for a Twilight Zone or like something to really scare you or something, this probably isn't for you. It's well written though. It's fun. And that Twilight Zone, yeah. So it was an 85 series, 1985, and it ended in 89. So yeah, right on the heels of that. So maybe to continue, what they had going on there, they came out with this comic. I'm not sure, but again, if you're looking for Twilight Zone, We're not even. It's weird. You're missing a lot of elements. This didn't get narrated anywhere. It didn't have the Twilight Zone feel to it, and then it didn't have like kind of like the what's the word? The moral. There was no moral of the story. There was I don't know. It didn't play like the Twilight Zone, but it was fun. It was a pretty good read. I definitely suggest it as just a fun, campy one shot from the 90s. So I guess that's all I'll say about it. Check it out if you're into that kind of thing. If not, skip it. But please let me know if you guys can. Let me know if this was interesting to you. Let me know if a solo episode is something fun, something I should try again, or if I should just leave it here and only do them with a co-host. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. And of course, as always, make sure you check us out on social media. We're on X, formerly Twitter. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on YouTube. And if you can, leave a review. Any of those places is greatly appreciated, positive or negative, whatever you got to say. We'll take it. We'll take constructive criticism if you've got it. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. And I can't thank Steve Orlando enough for coming on. That was one of the coolest moments of my podcasting career so far. Talked to some really, really cool people. We've had Tyler Crook, Steve Fox, Raphael Albuquerque, Erica Schultz. There's just been some really, really cool creators on here. Jenna Cha and Lonnie Nadler. Just wow, some cool guests on here that I never thought I'd talk to in my whole life, and I have. And Steve Orlando was definitely one of those people. I can cross that off a bucket list of people I've wanted to speak to. So that's really, really cool. So thank you guys for listening to that as well. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.